The clink of a wine glass can sound like a death knell. I remember the chill crawling up my spine. The way my fingers tightened around the linen napkin in my lap. 30 years and he looked at me like a stranger as he raised his glass. Not to me, but to her. That was the moment something inside me snapped. And something else was born. If you've ever given your life to someone who thought they could erase you with a smile, this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're watching from. Because you'll want to see how this ends. They always dim the lights in those expensive restaurants. Maybe it's to help you forget the price tags on the menu. Or maybe it makes betrayal easier to swallow. I was staring at the flicker of the candle between us when he lifted his glass. Mark, my husband, my partner, my entire goddamn life for the past 30 years, to new beginnings. He said, smiling like the smug bastard he's always been. Only I hadn't seen it before. That smile used to mean love, safety, home. Now it meant war. Erin, sitting just a little too close beside him, let out a soft laugh and reached for her water. Her fingers brushed his arm like it was second nature. I caught the way she looked at him, the way her other hand rested protectively over her belly. I'm pregnant, she said, her eyes glinting. There was a pause, not in the room. The waiter was still pouring wine. A couple nearby was laughing. But inside me, something twisted deep down, like it was being wrung out, pregnant. Mark didn't look at me. Not once. His eyes stayed locked on Erin, proud, pleased, like he'd just won a prize. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled slow and small. The kind of smile that takes effort when your hands are shaking under the table. Because I already knew. I knew about the bank transfers. The business dinners that turned into hotel reservations. The way she started calling him in text messages I wasn't supposed to see. I knew, and I'd spent the last 6 weeks preparing. I lifted my glass to new beginnings, I said softly, my voice steady, clear, and laced with venom. Mark finally turned to me. For the first time all night. The smugness slipped just a little when our eyes met. I emptied the joint accounts this morning, I said, still smiling. Froze the business assets. And filed for divorce. You could have heard a pin drop. The waiter blinked. Erin's mouth fell open slightly like a fish gasping for air. And Mark looked confused. Truly, undeniably confused. For the first time in decades, I hope you both enjoy your new beginning, I added. Placing my napkin gently on the table, then I stood. I remember every step away from that table, my heels clicking against the marble. The hostess blinking as I passed, the smell of marinara lingering in the air. I noticed the tiny stain on the carpet near the entrance, right where I'd stood the year before, waiting for him to arrive late to our anniversary dinner. Funny what the brain chooses to remember. I walked out into the night not as a woman falling apart, but as one finally waking up. And for once, Mark was the one left having to explain something. I didn't go home, not the one we shared. I had a plan. A checklist. I wasn't Helen Carter anymore, the woman who swallowed every insult. Every dismissal, every you just don't understand the business. Sweetheart, that Helen died the moment Erin touched her stomach and called it a miracle. This Helen was done waiting quietly while other people decided her worth. The game was on. And I had just made the first move. The silence in the car was suffocating, not because of noise, but because of memory. Every inch of that black leather interior reminded me of Mark, of us, of who I used to be. I gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary. My knuckles went pale against the dark. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline, from rage. From 30 years of swallowing words I should have screamed. 30 years. I remembered the first day we moved into our home in Pasadena. The way the morning sun spilled across the porch. The smell of fresh paint in the kitchen. I made coffee in a machine we couldn't afford. Mark kissed my cheek and said, one day, this place will be full of memories. He wasn't wrong, but none of those memories were mine. I gave him everything. I put my own dreams aside to build his. I was a damn good interior designer. I had a few small clients back then. One of my projects was even featured in Sunset magazine. But Mark said his business needed focus. You're the rock, he told me. You keep everything running. So I did. I handled the books before we could afford an accountant. I hosted clients, smiled through endless dinners where I was introduced as Mark's wife and little else. And I convinced myself that was love. I believed it because I had to. Because if it wasn't love, then what the hell had all of this been? The week after our 10th anniversary, I miscarried. I never told anyone, not even him. He was away on business. And I told myself there was no point burdening him with something already gone. I carried that loss alone, like I carried so much else. Just like I carried the weight of a house, a marriage, a life he barely showed up for. I pulled into a motel just outside Glendale. Nothing glamorous, just clean, efficient, anonymous. I paid in cash that morning. The clerk barely looked up when I asked for the key. Good. Inside the room. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the shaking pass through me. My legs felt like jelly. My mouth was dry. My heart was pounding like I'd just escaped a burning building because in a way, I had. The phone on the nightstand buzzed. Missed calls from Mark. I didn't answer. I wouldn't, not tonight. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Labeled neatly in black marker, contingency plan hack bank statements, asset transfer forms, power of attorney revocation, business contracts bearing my signature, clauses he never bothered to read. I wrote those myself. Funny thing about being the silent partner, no one notices when you're the one holding the pen. I opened my laptop and checked the wire transfer. Again, clean, perfectly timed. The business accounts were frozen under the emergency fraud clause I'd triggered with the bank that morning. By tomorrow, Mark would wake up to an empire in stasis, untouchable, useless without me. I stared at the screen, but I wasn't really seeing it. My mind drifted back to the restaurant. Erin's smug little smirk. The way she rubbed her belly like it was a trophy. My stomach churned. She was barely older than our goddaughter. Hell, she was our goddaughter, and that's when the memory hit me like a freight train. Erin's 6th birthday. She'd been painfully shy, hiding behind her mother's skirt. Mark had crouched down, handed her a pink teddy bear, and said, "She looks just like you did at that age, Helen." I remember laughing, thinking it was sweet. Now that sentence tasted like bile in the back of my throat. My head began to throb. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling, one of those ugly motel ceilings. Bumpy like dried toothpaste, but it was mine. This room, this moment, this choice, this aloneness. And for the first time in decades, being alone didn't feel like punishment. It felt like power. The next move would take courage. I needed to dig deeper into the finances, into Erin, into that contract I'd found with her name on it from 15 years ago. There was more beneath the surface. I could feel it, and I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered every filthy secret Mark Carter had buried. He thought I'd leave quietly. He had no idea who I'd become. I was never the type to snoop, or at least that's what I told myself every time I ignored my gut, every time I pushed away the discomfort gnawing at the edges of my sanity. But now I moved like a woman with nothing left to lose, because I did in single quotes. It was early AM when I unlocked the storage unit. Mark never thought I'd remember one of those anonymous concrete cubes on the outskirts of town, bare, fluorescent lit, silent. Except for the distant rattle of pipes, the code hadn't changed. Of course it hadn't. He never imagined I'd be the one using it. The lock turned with a dry metallic click. Inside were boxes, file drawers, a spare office chair with one leg taped up. Mark always called it overflow, a dumping ground for old invoices and manuals, but now I knew better. I pulled on gloves. I'd watched enough crime dramas in the background while folding laundry to know one thing for sure. Always wear gloves, not for crime, for cleanliness, for distance, for control. The first few boxes were useless. Old tax folders, client intake forms, outdated brochures. But the fourth box down felt different, newer folders. Labeled in Erin's handwriting. Of course it was her handwriting, bubbly, rounded letters, little hearts dotted over her E's. I opened one marked consulting. Inside were copies of wire transfers. Not from the business, from a personal account I didn't recognize. Payments made out to her. Thousands of dollars, monthly, consistent, every single one signed by Mark. I took a photo. Then another. Then another. I kept digging, and that's when I found it tucked inside an unlabeled manila envelope. A contract dated August, a consulting agreement for Erin Wallace, stating she'd be advising on branding and investor relations. Then I saw the clause, the specific one. In the event of dissolution of the firm or incapacitation of a founding partner, Ms. Wallace will be entitled to a guaranteed equity stake. My blood went cold. 30%. That clause wasn't in any version I had ever drafted. Not one I could have forgotten, and yet I remembered I had handled every legal update. Until I hadn't. I stared at the signature block. Helen Carter, co-founder Mark Carter, CEO Erin Wallace, consultant. Except my signature had been forged sloppily. The loop on the H was wrong. The angle of the C too sharp. I stepped back. My hands were slick with sweat inside the gloves. My breath came in short, sharp bursts, a roaring in my ears drowning everything else out. 15 years ago, Mark gave that girl barely out of college a permanent place in our company, in our lives. Not as a fling, he was building a future with her, back when I was still trying to get pregnant. I dropped to the cold concrete floor. My knees hit hard, pain shooting up my spine, but I didn't care. Because that was the moment the final piece locked into place. He had never chosen me. Not once. He tolerated me, used me, kept me because I was useful, because I played my role and never looked too closely. And now I was older, less desirable by his standards, easier to replace. Easier to discard. He thought I'd disappear quietly like an old piece of furniture. But I wasn't furniture, I was fire. I stood, gathered the documents I needed, and walked out. The city was still asleep. As I drove back toward the motel, the folder sat heavy in my lap like a weapon. And in a way, it was the kind that cuts quietly, strategically, without fingerprints. My phone buzzed again. Voicemail, a new message. I didn't open it. Not yet. There was more to uncover, more threads to pull. But now I had one that led straight to the heart of the rot. Mark's world was built on lies. And I was going to be the woman who tore it down. The first time I ever saw Erin Wallace, she had chocolate on her face and a ribbon in her hair. 6, maybe 7, shy. Her mother, Karen, was one of those effortlessly charming women, always laughing too loud, always touching your arm when she spoke. Mark said they were old college friends. She'd moved to Pasadena after a bad breakup and needed help settling in. Of course we helped. That's what good people do, right? And Erin was sweet, quiet. She used to sit on our couch flipping through my design magazines, asking if she could have a house like that someday. I made her cocoa, took her school shopping. When Karen got the flu, she called me Aunt Helen. Even though we weren't related, I loved that child. That child who looked so much like me when I was her age. Too much now that I think about it. The soft brown curls, the gap in her front teeth, the way her nose crinkled when she laughed. I should have seen it, God. I should have seen it, but I didn't. Not until I was sitting in my car outside the county clerk's office, staring at a copy of Erin's birth certificate, one I'd gotten after 3 hours of bureaucracy and polite lies. Mother, Karen Wallace. Father, Mark Edward Carteri. Didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat there, nails digging into the steering wheel, breathing slowly through my nose like I'd been taught in Lama's class all those years ago. A class I'd taken alone. Mark had been busy that day, busy building another family. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that filled the car. It didn't even sound like me. Not the woman I used to be. That Helen, the one who trusted, who believed, who bent without breaking, was already gone. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a funeral, and I wasn't mourning my marriage anymore. I was mourning myself. My entire adult life had been built on a lie with dimples, a giggle, and big brown eyes. I raised my husband's daughter not out of forgiveness or grace, but out of ignorance, out of faith. Mark let me hold that girl in my arms, let me buy her birthday presents. Let me believe we were doing something good. All the while, he was laughing behind my back. And Erin, she knew. I could see it now. The looks, the quiet condescension in her voice once she joined the business. The way she said my name, Helen, like it was a placeholder, not a person. She had played along, waited patiently in the wings, watched me give up my life piece by piece, and never said a word. And now she was pregnant with the second child Mark never gave me. That night, I drove to my sister's house. Linda didn't ask questions. She opened the door, handed me a glass of wine, and let me collapse on her couch. She knew something was coming. She always did. I need to show you something, I told her. I laid everything out on her dining table, the forged contract, the bank transfers, the birth certificate. She stared in silence, jaw tight. This is criminal, she finally whispered. I shook my head. It's Mark, that's worse. No one ever believes you when it's someone like him. We sat there in silence, the clock ticking, her dog snoring softly in the corner. Then Linda looked me straight in the eye. So what are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? Not if I was going to act, but how. I was done surviving. Now I was going to start strategizing. I leaned back in the chair and smiled for the first time in days, a cold, deliberate smile. I'm going to take everything he built and make him watch me do it. Because love didn't destroy me, he did, and now I would be the one writing the ending. You don't really know yourself until you decide to burn everything down. The morning I filed the paperwork, the sky over Pasadena was impossibly blue, one of those crisp, cloudless California days that almost dares you to stay angry. I walked into the courthouse at 8 a.m., heels clicking against the tile, folder tucked under my arm. Not a single hair out of place. People looked at me and saw nothing threatening. Someone's assistant, a retiree, maybe a judge's wife. No one saw the grenade I was carrying. Divorce petition. Helen Carter v. Mark Edward Carter. Emergency asset freeze. Corporate injunction under Clause 14C of the founding agreement. His smug little signature was right there on the page. I had the power, now I just needed to use it. The clerk didn't blink. She stamped the documents, took my ID, handed me a receipt, and just like that, my 30-year marriage began unraveling, one legal stamp at a time. I walked back out into the sunlight, heart pounding, not from fear but from freedom. Back at the motel, I made 2 calls. First, the bank. I confirmed the freeze on our joint accounts, the business accounts, and the executive card I knew Erin had been using for her company dinners. Second, Mark's lawyer. I didn't ask to speak to him. I left a message. This is Helen Carter. As of 8 a.m. this morning, I filed for divorce and enacted Clause 1 for C. Please advise your client to retain separate counsel. Oh, and tell him to check his wallet. He'll notice it's lighter. Click. Then I waited. It didn't take long. At 1 o'clock, my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered and said nothing. Helen, his voice. God, that voice. I used to fall asleep to it, warm beside him in our bed. Now it sounded like static. Where the hell are you? He snapped. I smiled. Somewhere I don't have to look at you. You froze the accounts. What are you thinking? Are you having some kind of breakdown? No, Mark, I'm finally having a breakthrough. Silence. I pictured him pacing, running a hand through his thinning hair, staring around the house we built together, the house I designed, painted, filled with laughter, pain, and long stretches of quiet. I have a child on the way, he hissed. Like it was a threat. I almost laughed. Then I suggest you figure out how to support her, I said. Because that money isn't coming from me. You can't do this. You don't know what you're doing. That did it. I dropped my voice low and steady. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking my life back. Every dollar. Every shred of dignity. Every hour I spent shrinking so you could shine. Jesus, Helen, stop. No. You don't get to talk now. You had 30 years. I was loyal. I was quiet. I gave up everything. You gave me lies. You let me raise your child while you laughed behind my back. And now, I said, you're going to learn what happens when the woman you underestimated decides she's done. I hung up. And I didn't cry. I packed up the motel room and moved into a short-term rental in Glendale. Clean lines. Open light, no memories. I bought new sheets, new towels, a single cup coffee machine. Mine. That evening, I sat on the floor with a glass of wine and watched the sky fade from gold to black, like someone had pulled a curtain across the world. I breathed deep, unhurried, free, for the first time in 30 years. I didn't have to ask anyone what they wanted for dinner. I didn't have to worry about my tone at some business function or tiptoe around a man whose ego filled every room. That night, I slept like a woman who had just burned her prison to the ground. And when I woke up, I was already planning my next move. The first headline hit 2 days later. Pasadena power couple in shock divorce. Financial freeze raises eyebrows. I was brushing my teeth when I saw it. The toothpaste tasted bitter and minty as I stared at my face on the screen, grainy, cropped from a charity gala years ago. Me beside Mark, smiling, champagne glass in hand. I spat. The article was cautious at first, polite, speculative, but the phrase unconfirmed allegations of financial misconduct practically jumped off the page. That was all it took. By noon, 5 more outlets had picked it up. By evening, a local podcast dropped an emergency episode with a clickbait title, The Fall of Mark Carter, Divorce, Deceit, and a Mysterious Frozen Fortune. They had no idea, not yet, but they would. I watched it all unfold from my rental, wrapped in a navy robe, sipping bitter coffee from a chipped mug that felt more honest than any crystal glass I'd ever washed by hand. The comments were vicious, speculative, cruel, most of them aimed at me. She finally snapped. She's jealous. Bet she's bitter because the new girl's younger. I closed the laptop. I'd lived under the weight of other people's opinions long enough. They could think whatever they wanted. I had the facts, and I wasn't bitter. I was brilliant. And the best part? They hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. That came later when someone, I don't know who and don't care, leaked the internal memos, emails, and bank records. It was all there. Mark's double billing, the quiet payments, expenses labeled consulting that funneled straight into Aaron's personal Venmo, the Manhattan suite paid for with company funds, to first-class flights booked under fake client names, one of them hers. The documents were anonymously delivered to a journalist I'd quietly contacted 2 weeks earlier. Danielle Griggs, local, sharp, no nonsense. I gave her the truth in a neat envelope. She turned it into fire. The headline that changed everything dropped on a Thursday morning inside the Empire. Mark Carter's web of lies and the woman who brought him down. This time, the photo was just me standing alone outside the courthouse, sunglasses on, chin lifted. And the public flipped. Suddenly, I wasn't the crazy wife. I was the woman who saw through the lies, the woman who fought back, the woman who did what no one else dared. Former employees started coming forward. Quiet messages became loud statements. He made me sign NDA letters. He took credit for everything Helen designed. She ran that company, not him. I didn't respond. Not publicly. Not yet, but the tide had turned. Mark tried to fight it. Of course he did. He went on camera with a tired statement and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She's unstable, Mark said. She's retaliating. That night, I got a message from an old friend I hadn't heard from in years. Unstable? You mean unshakable? I'm so proud of you. And then another. Finally, someone shut that arrogant bastard down. Erin vanished from social media within hours. Her LinkedIn quietly changed to seeking new opportunities. Friends deleted old posts. Her influencer account disappeared. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered her at the dinner table, hand on her belly. Eyes glittering, that smug curl at the corner of her mouth. She knew. And she wanted me to sit there. Accept it, fade quietly while they built their shiny new beginning. No. Not. This time, they didn't get to write the ending. I did, and I was just getting started. Silence can be the loudest sound in the world. I hadn't spoken to Mark since the call after the asset freeze. He didn't try again. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. But the world? The world was anything but quiet. 3 weeks after Danielle's expose, the real flood began. An email from a woman named Lisa Hartman landed in my inbox. Subject: I used to work for him. Then another. Then 5 more. Then 30 to receptionists. Interns, accountants, women, men. People who had walked away from Carter & Co. with shame stuck in their throats and silence pressed to their lips. Until now, they had been mocked, gaslight, undermined, passed over for promotions after doing all the work. One woman had her designs sold to a client under Mark's name. Another found Erin wearing the necklace her grandmother had made, the one she lost at a company retreat. Story after story. Abuse didn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it came with a smile and a bonus check that was always less than promised. Danielle wanted to run a follow-up piece. This time, she didn't want anonymous sources. She wanted me. No camera, I told her. Not yet, she agreed. We met at a cafe in Silver Lake, small enough to disappear into. She wore jeans and a leather jacket. I wore the calm of a woman who had walked barefoot through fire. Her recorder sat between us. Why now? She asked. I watched the steam rise from my tea. Earl Grey, no sugar, because I was tired of being erased. I said. We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything except the things I still needed to keep close. Some knives stay sharper when hidden. When the second article dropped, it didn't just trend. It roared. Helen Carter speaks, a legacy built on silence, and the woman who refused to stay quiet. This time, the photo was me walking into the courthouse alone, determined. No sunglasses. No fear. I was done hiding. That same week, I received an email from Ava Clean, lawyer. Harvard-educated, fierce. She'd been following my story. And she had an idea. We start a foundation, she said, for women rebuilding their lives after financial and emotional abuse. We call it the Carter Clause, and we make sure no woman ever signs her name away again. Without knowing exactly what it means, I said yes. I didn't hesitate. We launched with a GoFundMe that hit its goal in hours. CBS called, then NPR, then someone from Netflix left a voicemail I still haven't returned. Mark's response was pathetic: a countersuit, defamation, emotional distress, loss of business reputation. The judge dismissed it in under 10 minutes. Turns out when you have emails, contracts, signatures, it's hard to argue with the truth. His last ally, a corporate partner named Greg Toiver, released a statement distancing himself from Mr. Carter's conduct. Translation: he saw the ship sinking and grabbed the nearest lifeboat. Erin tried to resurface with a tweet about healing and protecting her peace. It was ratioed into oblivion. People had seen enough, heard enough. And now they were listening to me, not the wife, not the accessory, not the shadow in the room. Me. Helen Carter, the woman no one saw coming. The woman who would never be invisible again. She died believing I would be taken care of. Eleanor Carter, Mark's mother, wasn't perfect, but she treated me with something close to love. The old school, apron-wearing kind. She sent handwritten birthday cards every year, even when Mark forgot. She taught me how to make lemon bars from scratch, called me her girl, hugged me tighter than my own mother ever had. She also died 2 months before the divorce. Mark told me she'd left everything to him to keep things simple. I didn't question it then. I was still clinging to scraps of trust, still hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. The call came from her attorney, Mr. Arlo Finch, a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite and had never met a smile. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, he said. Then he paused. I suppose it's Ms. now, he said. Just Helen, I told him. He hesitated. There's something you need to see. I'm sending you the original will and the amended version Mark brought in 6 weeks. Before Eleanor's passing, I sat in my new apartment, hands clenched around a mug of chamomile tea that had gone completely cold. I read the documents side by side. The original will left a percentage of her estate to me. The vacation cottage in Mendocino, her jewelry, her Buick Riviera, the one she never let Mark touch. The amended version left everything to Mark, every last cent. It was signed by Eleanor in a shaky, cursive that didn't match any of her previous signatures. Mark had power of attorney, medical and financial. I had been in her hospital room the day before she passed. She was lucid, clear. She told me she was proud of me. She said, "You were always the steady one, Helen. He never deserved you." She hugged me. And 6 weeks before that moment, he erased me. The papers slipped from my hands. I couldn't breathe. How do you mourn someone twice? Once when they die and again when you realize they were used against you. I called Arlo. "This signature," I said. "You've seen it. You know it isn't hers." Silence. Then, quietly, "I can't say that officially. But yes, I agree with you. Can anything be done?" A longer pause. "No, not right now. Not without years of litigation. And with the statute of limitations and Mark's legal protections." His voice trailed off. "I'm sorry." I hung up and screamed, a deep, guttural sound I didn't know I was capable of. It tore through the walls of my small apartment. My voice cracked halfway through and I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing like I hadn't in years. Not over Mark, not over money. Over Eleanor. She loved me. And he took that too, but something shifted that night. Something essential. This wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about justice. About truth. About every woman who has been erased, silenced, overwritten by a man with a louder voice and a better tailor. I stood up. My face was swollen. My heart ached, but my mind was clear. Mark had taken almost everything, but I still had my voice. And now I was going to use it to make sure no one else ever lost theirs. Justice doesn't arrive in a blaze of glory. It comes in paperwork, in deadlines, in cold, precise language spoken by people who have seen too many lies to flinch. It was a Tuesday when I walked into the office of Cheryl Kim, a forensic accountant known for unraveling financial knots like they were shoelaces. Her desk was spotless. Her blouse crisp. She didn't ask if I wanted water. She asked for evidence. I handed her two flash drives and a folder labeled Personal Hell, Volume 1. "Mark Carter," I said. "Let's see what he's really worth." She started working before I even finished the sentence. For weeks, we dug quietly, carefully. Shell companies, misreported earnings, undisclosed payments disguised as charitable donations, personal expenses charged to corporate accounts, luxury hotel stays, jewelry, a double-egg massage chair for Aaron's Manhattan condo. He thought I wouldn't notice. He forgot I used to balance those books. Cheryl's final report arrived in a manila envelope. It was a bomb. I sent it to the IRS. No note, no drama. 3 weeks later, Mark Carter received a federal audit notice. The silence afterward was delicious. Then came the headlines. Feds launch probe into Carter and Co. Fraud allegations surface. From boardroom to courtroom, Mark Carter under investigation. He tried to call me, blocked. Then came a text. One sentence. "We could have handled this privately." I read it twice, then deleted it. He slept with a woman half my age, forged my name, rewrote my life, erased me from his mother's will. There would be nothing private about this. Erin went quiet. Her influencer account disappeared. Last I heard, she'd been let go after the audit froze payroll. She posted one vague Instagram story, black background, white text. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find your truth." I screenshot it. Because this was my truth. I had been a ghost in my own life. Now I was the storm. Clients pulled out. Speaking engagements were canceled. Investors fled. His name became poison in every email thread. And me? I was still angry. Still hollow in places. Still waking in the middle of the night, remembering the way he used to rest his hand on the small of my back in public like I was something to display. But I was awake now, and I wasn't disappearing ever again, but I was standing taller now. I drank my coffee more slowly. I walked down the street like I had every right to exist because I did. One afternoon, I sat in a bookstore flipping through a memoir by a woman who had left her husband after 35 years. The final line read, "They said I was broken, but they didn't realize I was breaking free." I closed the book and smiled. I wasn't broken. Not anymore. And the man who thought he could break me, he was the one being slowly, deliberately dismantled. One truth at a time. Revenge is loud. Freedom is quiet. It was a Tuesday. No headlines. No lawsuits. No leaked emails. Just the low hum of my neighbor's lawnmower and the smell of freshly cut grass drifting through the open window. I was sitting at the kitchen table. My kitchen table, simple, solid oak. Bought with my money. Chosen for no one's taste but my own. The sunlight landed across it just right, and for a moment, everything felt still, and that's when it hit me. It was over. Not in a dramatic courtroom gavel kind of way, but in the quiet realization that I no longer woke up wondering where he was. I wasn't scrolling articles to see if my name had been dragged through the mud again. There was no Aaron posting beach photos. No Mark playing the victim. No calls from lawyers. Just silence. And I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either. Not yet, but I was learning how to live inside it that afternoon. I walked down to the little cafe on the corner, the kind of place I used to skip. Too casual. Too small. Mark hated anything without valet parking and overpriced espresso. Now it was mine. The barista, a young man with tired eyes and a kind smile, looked up and said, "You're Helen, right?" I hesitated. "Yes." He handed me my latte. "You're kind of a legend around here." I didn't know what to say. As I turned to leave, a woman at the corner table waved me over. Late 40s. Curly hair streaked with gray. Fingers flying across a laptop. "Sorry," she said. "I don't mean to intrude, but I'm with the Reclaim Project. We help women start over after divorce, financial abuse, things like that." She paused, then smiled. "We've been following your story. Would you ever consider speaking at one of our events?" My mouth went dry. I had no speech prepared. No platform. No polished smile ready to perform. And for once, I didn't need one. I just said yes, not for them. Not for a performance. For me, because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Mark, or Aaron, or even Eleanor's will. It became about the version of me who never had a voice. The woman who stayed quiet so people would like her. Who made herself smaller so others could shine. Who stood in the background of every photo of her own life. Not anymore. I walked home with a flyer in my purse and a strange new feeling spreading through my chest. Not anger. Not grief. Purpose. That night, I opened my laptop. I didn't check the news. I didn't Google Mark. I opened a blank document and titled it, "The Woman You Forgot to Fear," and I started typing. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't telling someone else's story. I was finally telling mine. The first time I held my book in my hands. I cried, not a dramatic, movie scene cry. No music swelling. No arms around me. Just quiet tears slipping down my cheeks in the middle of my living room. Dust floating through a beam of afternoon light. The title gleamed in black serif font, "The Woman No One Saw" by Helen Carter Toa. 167 pages of pain, clarity, and cold truth. It wasn't just a memoir. It was a warning, a mirror. A flare in the dark for every woman who had ever been told to calm down, let it go, or be grateful. I wrote it over 6 brutal months, late nights, early mornings. Every chapter dragged pieces of me into the light, some I didn't even know I'd buried. I bled onto those pages. And I refused to clean it up. The day it went live on Amazon, it sold out in 3 hours. Then the emails came from strangers. From survivors. From daughters who watched their mothers go silent. From women who realized they had become their mothers. Even from men, quiet, ashamed, repentant. "Your book saved my sister. I left him. I took my kids and I left. You made me believe in myself again." Mark sent a cease and desist within hours. His lawyer claimed character defamation. Said I misrepresented events, weaponized emotion, and caused irreparable harm to his reputation. My response? I posted the cease and desist letter on my website with a single line caption. "Here's what silence looks like when it's scared." The public turned feral. The backlash was immediate. #WeSeeHelen. Trended for 3 days. I didn't ask for it. I didn't organize it. It found me. And Erin, she made one last attempt at sympathy, a long, rambling blog post about grief, confusion, being misled. Finding herself in an impossible situation. It was deleted within the hour. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Mark dropped the lawsuit quietly. No statement. No apology. His law firm removed his name from the masthead. Clients vanished. Speaking invitations disappeared. He still had money, but no one wanted to sit next to him anymore. At one event, a woman approached me holding a hardcover copy of the book. Her eyes looked like they had seen too much. She handed it to me to sign. Then said softly, "You didn't just survive him, you outlived his shadow." That's when I understood this was never about revenge. It was resurrection. I had taken everything he tried to erase and carved it into permanence. Not in court. Not in fire. But in ink. And nothing he did now could unwrite me. The Pacific is a strange blue in April, deeper, moodier. The kind of blue that feels like it could swallow you whole if you let it. I stood on the shore in Santa Monica. Toes pressed into the cool sand, the wind tugging softly at my scarf. The same date, April 10th. 31 years earlier, Mark and I had toasted our first anniversary at a small seafood place up the road. He'd bought me a necklace I later learned he charged to a company card. I wore it anyway. Today, I wore nothing but myself. No jewelry. No makeup, no performance. Just me. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I didn't check it, not yet. I wasn't ready to step out of this moment. The waves whispered as they rolled in, each one carrying away a version of me I no longer needed. The woman who apologized for speaking up. The woman who measured her worth by someone else's comfort. The woman who confused survival with peace. Gone. In her place stood someone quieter, clearer. Steel backed. For so long, I had lived braced for impact, waiting for the next lie, the next betrayal. The next wave meant to pull me under, but the storm had passed. The last I heard, Mark was consulting, a polished word for unemployed with excuses. Erin had moved to Denver. She took the baby with her. No more designer purses. No more brand deals. Just a woman holding the wreckage of a castle built on someone else's foundation. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't need to. Hate keeps you tethered. And I was finally free. I reached into my coat and pulled out my phone. One new voicemail. Hi Helen, this is Andrea from Beacon Publishing. We're thrilled with the sales numbers for The Woman No One Saw. We'd love to talk about a second book, maybe even a series. Let us know if you're open. I smiled, not because of the offer, but because they saw me. Really saw me. I closed the phone and slipped it back into my pocket, eyes fixed on the horizon. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't belong to anyone, not to a husband, not to a story someone else told, not to a legacy I never chose. I belonged to me. And the silence around me wasn't loneliness. It was peace. I turned and walked away from the water, one steady step at a time. Whatever came next would be mine. All of it, and this time, I would write the story myself. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you feel called to, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.